Hey everyone, welcome to another video. Today I'm out here on a lovely day in the absolutely incredible cliffs of Moher in Ireland, surrounded by fulmars and other seabirds swirling around and in a gorgeous landscape full of wildflowers. But before we go on, let's take a step back and start from the beginning. This summer I went on a short little trip to Ireland with my dad, and I thought I would put together this video to show you some of the landscapes, some of the nature we saw, and of course some of the photos that I was able to take on the trip. This is the first time I'm doing this sort of video, more of a kind of travel trip report, so yeah, I don't know how it's going to turn out, but let me know what you think and I hope you enjoy it. After driving across from Dublin in typical grey, drizzly Irish weather, our first stop was along the west coast, near Doolin. Right away, even just on a morning walk down to the water, there was already a really beautiful landscape, filled with a variety of wildflowers and lots of fascinating rock formations. Since I didn't find too many macro subjects a lot of the time, I decided to try my hand at some landscape photography while in Ireland, starting with this stone gate in one of the many old stone walls that scatter the Irish countryside. Later on that same day, we hiked along the coast towards the cliffs of Moher, which you saw at the beginning of this video. And this was another absolutely beautiful place to hike along this gorgeous rocky coastline. It was quite windy that day as well, although the wind that day would prove to be nothing compared to some of the wind we experienced in a few other places later on in the trip. At one point I was able to walk down onto the rocks a little bit closer to the water, and it turns out that the rocks out here are absolutely coated in lichens and mosses, creating what almost looks like a tiny forest out on the rocks. There were lots of birds around, like these oyster catchers here, along with rock pipits and stone chats and wheatears and lots of gulls, like these ones sitting out here on the rocks by the water. One insect that I was really quite excited to see, because I almost never see them back in Germany, are these burnet moths. But it actually turns out that these burnet moths are really quite common in Ireland. I feel like I saw loads of them at almost every location where I went. But still, I decided to get a couple of photos, and in this case my favorite is this super close-up detail shot of the wings, showing the intricate details of these scales. Eventually we reached the biggest cliffs, which were really imposing and honestly quite difficult to show the scale of in a video, but there were lots and lots of birds flying around, like fulmars and kittiwakes, and I've heard that puffins breed here as well, though we were a bit late in the year to see those. I spent a while trying to get some photos of the fulmars flying by in front of the cliffs, and I ended up with a few results that I'm really happy with. After a very brief stop at the most touristy spot along the cliffs, we continued walking along and ended up at, yet again, a very different looking spot along the coastline. This time there were lots of rock pools, and I spent a while exploring these rock pools to see what kind of life I could find. Turns out that these rock pools were absolutely teeming with life. These beautiful green and pink sea anemones waving their tentacles around, this prawn or shrimp of some sort just sitting there in the pool, and same with this really cute little fish. I don't know exactly what species it is, but I'll put the name on screen if I figure it out. And finally I got a couple of photos of the barnacles and limpets that were completely coating the rocks along the coast here. Our next destination, not very far away, was the Burren, an area with really very unique and beautiful rock formations, and also an area really well known for wildlife. Apparently around 70% of all species known to live in Ireland can be found in the Burren. While we unfortunately only had time for one fairly short hike, it was still a gorgeous landscape to explore, and the Burren is definitely a place I would love to visit again. I was really happy to see some of the incredible variety of wildflowers found here, and while the time we were there was not the peak season, we were still able to see some really cool species, including one type of orchid, these beautiful little fragrant orchids. There were a couple of insects around as well, like this absolutely massive dragonfly we saw, and unfortunately I wasn't able to get any photos of this one, but I did get a couple of video clips, and I think this is what's called a blue emperor dragonfly. We also saw this tiny little blue butterfly higher up in the hills, and I was able to get a couple of photos of this one. Looking closely at the rocks revealed some fascinating textures, and some of the plants growing out of the cracks made for some really interesting compositions. This one fern was particularly pretty, and I really like this photo. I don't know if black and white was the right decision, but I think it works here. Some of the rocks even had fossils in them as well, which was very cool to see. Once we reached the highest point of our hike, we retreated to some absolutely gorgeous views of the Burren landscape, along with some of the strongest winds I have ever experienced. For the final destination in this video, we took a series of buses up the west coast to Letterfrack, where we spent the night before heading out in the morning for a hike around the mountains of Connemara National Park. Before we could start climbing, we had to cross this boggy area, which was really full of sundews and sphagnum moss and this really cool looking heather called cross-leaved heath. Even just after the first little stretch of climbing, the views were absolutely gorgeous, but there was still quite a ways to go up even just to get to the first peak, so we continued our hike and were accompanied along the way by the occasional sheep grazing in the hills and sometimes even looking down at us from the very peaks of the mountains. All along the slopes there were wetter patches of ground full of mosses and tiny little ferns and liverworts, and taking a closer look with the macro lens reveals a whole world of intricate details and textures and colors. And I think this just goes to show that even in these vast scenic landscapes, it's still worth taking a closer look to see the tiny little treasures that the landscape holds. After reaching the first peak along our hike, we continued along this rocky ridge, and the wind continued to get stronger and stronger, but the views were absolutely gorgeous, and I really love this rocky landscape dotted with bogs and heather.
I'm not sure if you can hear me, but we've reached the summit of Benbrack, which is at 582 meters altitude. Not the highest mountain up in this mountain range, the 12 Bens in Connemara, but it's pretty high up, and it is extremely windy. Right now, I'm in the middle of a cloud. Guess you could still see me. But wow, this is amazing. When the clouds are not quite as dense, there's the most spectacular views, and the way up here was incredible, and yeah, just really kind of speechless.
So that's all I've got for this video. It took me a bit longer than I'd hoped to get it all finished and published, but I have one more in progress that I filmed while I was in Ireland, and for now, thank you very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.